All right, hello everybody. I hope everyone's having a great day. So today we're going to do our first field trip, and this field trip actually focuses on our campus ecosystems. So what we're going to start with is we're going to start with our pine flatwoods ecosystem. And so if you notice off in the distance right over there, there are some pine trees. These are primary slash pines. We may see a longleaf pines stuck in campus somewhere, but primarily in this area of Florida they are going to be slash pines. And so across the street there's some more pine trees as well. And we did actually have a very nice historical area of pine flatwoods here on campus, but that pine flatwoods area is where the new Soviet Road and the new gym and rec center have been posted and put in over there in the distance. So unfortunately we lost some of those ecosystems on our campus here. One of the characteristics of our pine flatwoods ecosystems is they're often intermixed with other ecosystems and also wetlands. And so right here behind me is the Sovi Bridge. This is the bridge that takes us out over to Sovi. And one of the things that naturally happened in this area is sheet flow would flow from the wetlands further in. And I don't know if you can notice in the background, we do have some cypress trees in the background, way in the background. I don't know if you can see them, but we're gonna make our way there today. So we have this body of water here. It almost kind of looks like a river, but it doesn't really extend much further back. And so what we did is we sloped the ground here, and we actually put this drainage structure. And so this water that would naturally sheet flow through this area, right? Obviously we don't want to have it sheet flowing across a road, so we had to build this Sovi Bridge. So this water naturally kind of drains towards this area, and instead of sheet flowing, we actually built a drainage basin, and it drains under the Sovi Bridge, and then it goes back into sheet flow towards the pine flatwoods area over there. And so if we walk along just a little bit for a minute, take a look at this area here. Let's take a quick look across the street. And if you notice, there's actually a retention pond built there. And, you know, with a natural ecosystem, we actually didn't need that retention pond. So anybody who's been familiar with campus prior to the last 2 years or so knows this retention pond didn't used to be here, and we used to be able to walk through that area. And so, however, when they put the road in, they put the gym in, they put that new housing in back there, right? We lost the natural ability for the water to actually flow in sheet flow and percolate down into the ground naturally and travel on further down into the watershed. So now we actually have to have these water control structures. So again, this water control structure is something we built, but it is a result of continued development, which is one of the things that we'll see is a big theme here in Florida. All right, so this is one of the entrances to our campus trail system down near South Village. And again, right, this starts out in a pine flatwoods ecosystem. And one of the things that we'll notice here is it actually tends to be pretty overgrown in this area. And the other thing, we said that pine flatwoods are often intermixed with wetlands. And so I'm sure we've had a lot of rain in the last couple of days. It's mid-June here or so. And we'll see probably some water on the trail. So just a quick safety thing I would like to mention to you all is that, you know, these trails are open to students. You don't have to go back here with a faculty member or group. You guys can go back here anytime. But I encourage you to always be safe. And so one of the things I like to give is my snake talk. And so as we walk along the trail here, right, we notice that, you know, it may be a little bit muddy. Sometimes there's water in the middle, but it's pretty overgrown on both sides of the trail, and we'll talk about that. And this area where we're walking in actually has the highest density of rattlesnakes on our campus. So we do share our campus with things like alligators, rattlesnakes, water moccasins, and lots of other wildlife. And so as far as snakes and wildlife and things like that go, I always encourage us to be respectful and cautious, but not fearful. And when we think about snakes and we think about us, most snakes are somewhere between 1 and 2 pounds, and I would say you probably weigh somewhere between 1 and 200 pounds. So right off the bat, you're somewhere between 1 to 200 times larger than the snake. This is like you standing next to an elephant. And if I told you that you had to fight the elephant and you were only allowed to fight it by attacking it with your face and biting it, is that something you would like to do? And the answer is no, right? So snakes do not want to bite us. We are much larger than their prey, right? Many snakes that use venom, right? That venom is not designed to kill something like us. And so if you were to get bit by a rattlesnake, as long as you made it to a hospital, you'd be absolutely fine, right? But those snakes don't actually want to bite us, right? And when a snake bites somebody, it's usually their last option, right? And when somebody gets bit by a snake, one of 3 things is usually the cause. The person stepped on the snake, the person was trying to catch the snake, or the person was trying to kill the snake. So again, if we're respectfully cautious, these snakes do not want anything to do with us. Right? When a rattlesnake shakes its rattle at you, it's not a sign of aggression. It's not a warning sign. It's basically a sign saying, hey, I'm over here. Please don't step on me. Some people say that water moccasins are aggressive and that they've chased people. And it may seem like that, but water moccasins are actually not that intelligent. And if they are startled, they will actually head straight for their den. And so if you happen to be running in the same direction as that snake's den, it will appear as if that snake is chasing you. So that's my snake talk, right? Snakes do not want to attack you with their face. We should be respectfully cautious of snakes, and we should be respectful of them, but we don't need to actually be fearful of them. So when we're walking on these trails, right, and there's a mud puddle in the middle of the trail, that snake's not going to lay in a mud puddle. Where it's going to lay is in these bushes and things along the side of the trail. And so that's why it's actually super important to stay on the trail, even if you're going to get your feet muddy. Okay, so let's take a minute and we'll talk about fire ecology in our pine flatwoods ecosystem. And so if we notice right up here, right, there's actually some burn marks on a lot of these trees, and these burn marks are like 20, 15 feet in the air. And that's actually not a natural feature of our pine flatwoods ecosystem. This pine flatwoods that we're walking in is actually significantly overgrown. Most pine flatwoods will burn every 2 to 5 years or so by natural lightning strikes. And if we talk about fire in the pine flatwoods ecosystem, right, typically what happens is the largest, oldest trees will get struck by lightning. And when a pine tree is somewhere between 80 to 100 years old, one of the things that it develops is heart rot. And so inside of the tree, you have this really flammable material. If anyone is ever a Boy Scout and you've ever looked at the inside of a pine tree, it's got this kind of this dark wood color. And sometimes it's called light or not. It burns really well. It's got a lot of dried sap. But during a lightning storm, if that lightning strikes the top of one of these taller trees here, it may actually smolder in that tree for several days, right? Giving the chance for the rain to stop, the ground to dry up, and maybe a burned piece of bark, an ash, or an ember falls down to the ground. And one of the things that pine trees continuously drop year-round is pine needles. So let's make our way over here, and if we look on the ground, there are pine needles all over the ground, and they're dried out and they're very flammable. So that burned piece of ash will fall down, ignite these pine needles, and it will actually start a fire. Right? And again, this one area is pretty overgrown. Most pine flatwoods areas have an open understory with a nice breeze, and so the wind will push those embers, and those embers will ignite things like wiregrass. So most of the understory of pine flatwoods are usually filled with wiregrass. Right? And even though this plant is very much alive, right, the tips of it actually dry out, and so the fire will actually burn through the wiregrass. And what happens is that fire will go through this entire understory, burn up all the dead stuff, right, which we seem to have a lot of right here, and it will kill off things that are not fire adapted, so things that are exotic, not supposed to be living in this ecosystem, they will burn up. But then if we think about all the stuff that burns up, all that stuff that burns up turns into ash, and that ash acts as nutrients for the environment. So then what happens is, if you have a pine cone, and I actually don't, oh, here's one over here. If you have a pine cone, right, these pine cones don't actually open up on their own. They actually are fire dependent. So the fire actually has to come through, open up the pine cone, and that will release the seeds. So now imagine if you're a pine tree and you've got the seed on the ground, right? The fire just came through, it burned up all the other stuff, so none of this stuff is living on the ground. There's all this excess nutrients in the environment from everything that burned up, and then you get a little bit of rainfall, and this tree's got ideal growing conditions, right? No competition, excess nutrients, plenty of water, so it's ideal conditions for a pine tree to grow. One other way that these pine cones can actually open up, that doesn't require fire, is the fox squirrel. It's one of the few animals that could actually tear into these things and open them up and get the seeds out. And if they don't eat the seed, sometimes it will grow. And so if you ever see one of these and it looks like it's really chewed on, good evidence that it was actually a fox squirrel that did it. So one more thing that I want to talk about in terms of fire ecology here is that the fires in the pine flatwoods are usually only 2 or 3 feet off of the ground, right? So obviously if we were to have a fire here, it would be pretty significant because, right, there's dry material, right, 10 feet up in the air. But typically, right, when we have a fire, right, that fire is going to go 2 to 3 feet off of the ground, and it's not actually going to, right, kill the big pine trees because it's got this bark here. It's actually really thick layers like a phone book, and so if a fire were to hit this tree, it would actually burn off the outer layers of bark here, but the tree inside would stay very much alive. Right? If we were to have a massive fire where flames were, 20, 30 feet in the air, right, inside the tree, it's got a lot of water, it's got a lot of sap. That stuff could actually start to boil, and it will very quickly kill the tree, and the entire tree could burn. And also, if you have flames, right, and underbrush, right, so we've got these trees here, right, these palmetto trees, right, if the flames were to go up into the canopy, we could have a crown fire. And so those pine needles in the tree, again, are very flammable, and they could actually kill the tree as well if you have a crown fire. So when we look at juvenile pine trees, right, one of the things that we'll see is they actually grow very quickly. So they look like this. Sometimes they look like a toilet brush on a stick. And so, right, what these trees are trying to do is they're actually trying to grow as tall as they can, as fast as they can, before they spend any significant energy growing branches. So they pretty much just grow straight up. They're tall and skinny for a long time because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get up above the fire line before they start branching out, right? So if a fire were to come through here, this one's still pretty short. Obviously, this one would burn up in the fire. But if we had a more open understory here, the fire would actually go through the understory of this tree, and this tree would not burn up. While we're stopped here, right, we do have some more evidence of fires in the past on some of these trees right around here. And again, about 12 or 13 years ago at this point, we did have a fire here on campus. We actually almost had to evacuate campus because of this fire. And you notice these flames were, up to 20 feet tall on some of these trees. Get in here real quick. You can see the burn marks right here. And so again, that's because, right, we actually practice fire suppression here on campus. If a fire were to start, we actually have to come out here, we have to put it out. And the reason being is because we have students, we have buildings, there's too much liability to actually have natural fires here on campus. So what we actually do to mimic the results of fires, we actually practice mechanical removal of the underbrush. So every so often you'll actually see work crews coming out here. Usually they're from some of the local prisons or the local jails, and they come out here and they actually pull a lot of this dead stuff out of the ground. And what that does is that actually prevents all this from turning into fuel if we were to have a fire out here. And so in some ways it mimics the fire because it's removing all this underbrush, which a fire would do. However, what it's doing is it's actually removing all these nutrients from the ecosystem. Right? One of the benefits of the fire is that all this dead stuff on the ground would burn up and turn into ash, and those nutrients would go back into the ecosystem. So again, we're gonna continue on down the trail here, and one of the things that we're gonna experience as we walk down this trail is a slight elevation change. And so we're gonna walk down this trail, and a couple of things we're going to notice. And I'm actually going to turn the camera off. I'm not going to film all of it. But we're going to have a slight elevation change. We're going to go downhill just a little bit. And we'll notice more mud on the ground. And we'll notice that the understory starts to thin out. So there's not going to be as much stuff here. So here's a great example of that wiregrass. A little bit more open right here. So we're gonna notice, right, less stuff's gonna be on the ground, and we've got this wide open canopy up here, right? That open canopy is actually gonna close down. And so we're gonna have a more enclosed canopy, and we're gonna have less stuff on the ground, and we're gonna have a lower elevation. We're probably gonna have a little bit more mud on the ground. And we're gonna walk through an area called an ecotone. And that ecotone is a transition between two ecosystems. All right, so we're walking through this area that I described earlier as an ecotone, right? And so couple of things, it's hard to notice, right? But one of the most distinct changes is we're getting a little bit more shade here, and we're starting to see less and less stuff on the ground below us, right, in terms of vegetation. And another thing, right, obviously you can't feel this, but there's a distinct temperature change. And as we've hit this temperature change, it's probably 5 or 6 degrees cooler than it was in the Pine Flatwoods area. And so what we're doing is we're transitioning into an oak hammock ecosystem. So as we enter into our oak hammock ecosystem, right, a couple of big things. If we actually look overhead, right, we actually have a lot more vegetation over top than we do down here on the ground. And so Right, there's a little bit of light coming through right here, and so you could actually see where the light comes through. There's actually a lot of vegetation growing right here. But further back, there's not quite as much stuff on the ground. And again, the reason being is most of that sunlight hits the canopy, and so we have more vegetation in our canopy in our oak hammock ecosystems. The other thing, again, you couldn't quite realize it as we're walking along, but we had a slight elevation change. So we are right a little bit lower than we were in the pine flatwoods ecosystem. If we look at the soil here, right, it's a little bit more brown, it's a little bit more muddy, and there's more evidence that we've had standing water here longer throughout the year. And so a couple of neat differences between our pine flatwoods and our oak hammocks, right? Obviously, much of the vegetation is overhead in our oak hammock ecosystems. So we're not all that far from our pine flatwoods, but two different types of squirrel, right? We have the gray squirrel, lives primarily in our oak hammocks, right? And they live overhead. And the fox squirrel lives in the pine flatwoods, and the fox squirrel primarily lives on the ground. In terms of owls, right, the pine flatwoods has the great horned owl, has a much larger wingspan, actually hunts a lot of things on the ground, right, but it sits on those branches and it looks for the open ground to hunt their prey. Inside the oak hammocks, right, we will have the barred owl. It's going to be a lot more common. They're a smaller owl, not as great of a wingspan, but they're better at maneuvering through this closed canopy. And so again, as we continue on our campus trail here, right, and we're not that far from any type of civilization. I don't know if you could see it on the video, but those are the South Village dorms right there. Our elevation is going to continue to go down. And so again, we can see that we're starting to hit some water on the trail. And as a reminder, when you're walking on these trails, right, just stay on the trail even if it's flooded, especially if you're worried about snakes, because the snakes aren't going to be sitting here in the water. They're going to be sitting right through all that stuff. So you just want to stay right on the trail and make sure you're watching where you're putting your hands and your feet. And so we're going to continue on. We'll see another big ecotone in a little bit here, and I will turn the camera back on. All right, so I'm at the trailhead right behind Sovi. So South Village is right there in that direction. We've been continuing on the trail this way. So if you follow the trail this way, it will take us back to the Sovi Bridge. This sign's a little deceiving. It says to the outdoor classroom. If you don't know where the outdoor classroom is, it's quite a walk from here, but we're gonna make our way through there today and we'll end up there at the end. But we're walking along through here, and so a little bit slippery. One of the things I want to point out is that this puddle that I'm walking through, the water's actually kind of warm, and we've had a lot of rain in the last week, so this is mostly just kind of stagnant rainwater that I'm walking through right here. But I will tell you, when we get to our next big ecotone, the water's actually going to be quite cooler, and that's where we're actually going to be in water that's actually flowing across our campus as opposed to just being trapped in a puddle right now. So again, as we're walking along, we're getting a mix of some of our palmettos. There's an oak tree up there, there's a pine tree up there, but we're starting to see some of our cypress trees. So we're entering into that ecotone area here where it's a mixture of some of our upland and wetland ecosystems. And we went uphill just a little bit here, and ecosystem relatively dry where we are right now. All right, so right here we're right on the edge of this ecotone, right? So going forward up here, It's kind of hard to tell, but it's mostly cypress trees going forward. And then behind us, this is going to be the last of our oak trees, our palmettos, and our pine trees that we're going to see for a little bit. And again, we could distinctively go downhill just a little bit. And so I've stepped into this water now. And this water is actually significantly cooler than those puddles I was walking through before. So I don't know if you could see through the water, but there are a couple of fish out there in front of us. And a real interesting thing is probably about a week ago, this trail that I'm walking on, oh, there's an owl right there. I don't know if we caught him, but this trail that we're walking on right here is probably totally dry about a week and a half ago. And so this is all filled up from rainwater. And our campus ecosystems, one of the things that they do is they will filter that rainwater and they will soak it up kind of like a big sponge. And so most of this water is water that's fallen on our campus. And it's flown through our campus ecosystems. And it's collecting here. And so we're going uphill a little bit, so it's drying out a little bit. But I think it's really interesting that in just a couple of days, right, this area is filled up with water. And right, fish have already started to migrate into this new area. And this will probably stay filled probably until late September, October. Another thing, I don't know if you could catch it in the camera here, but on the surface of the water, there actually seems to be a little bit of reflective sheen on it. And it looks kind of like there's like oil or gasoline in the water. And one of the things I always want to tell my students is that that's not actually gasoline or oil or pollution from cars or things like that. That's actually cypress oil. So cypress trees actually do secrete a little bit of oil. And as they secrete that oil, it does float on the surface of the water, just as oil and water don't mix. So if you are exploring our campus trails and you decide to come back here on your own, right, two things that I always recommend, right? Bring somebody with you, right? Use the buddy system. Let somebody know where you're going. And the other thing I like to tell students is to actually visit this area through different times of the year, right? So this area right now is actually just starting to fill up with water, right? I've been out here during the rainy season, right? We're still pretty early in the rainy season. And I've been out here during the rainy season where this area has been waist deep. I've been out here right after Hurricane Irma and the water here was about to my chest. And if you come out here in late spring, this area is almost 100% dry. So you're just walking on a sandy path that time of the year. So as we make our way, we're actually at a crossroads on our trail. All right, there's this sign right here. It says to Sovi. I think this is actually kind of a pretty funny sign, especially if you come out here during the rainy season. We could actually see the an example of a water signature on here right here. So the water pretty often in the summertime comes right up to here, and so I think it's a pretty funny sign when it's filled with water that this is the pathway to South Village. So as we come up right here, if we look to the left, this is gonna be our exit today. So we're actually gonna walk out that way, and we'll again finish up at that outdoor classroom that we saw on the other sign. But for now, we're actually gonna head this way, and we're actually gonna walk into our campus Cypress Dome. So one of the really unique features that you get by watching this video as opposed to walking through here is that if you were walking through here with my class, the water would not be this clear. So naturally the water is really clear. We could see straight to the bottom here. It's about a foot deep right here as I'm walking through. It's almost up to my knees. And I would say probably through most of this walk, we're gonna be able to see straight to the bottom. Again, I don't know if you could see it through the water, but there are some fish swimming in front of us. If we were walking through here with a class of 30 to 40 students, it would be somewhat clear in front of me, but right behind me, once 40 students walk through this, you could actually see it stirred up just a little bit from me. But if you were at the back of the line, you wouldn't get to see any of this. So this is actually a unique experience to watch this on a video. And this is why I always encourage students to come out here on their own and enjoy one of the really unique features that our campus has. So a couple of things, we are hopefully at the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic. But an exciting feature of where we're going today is I would venture a guess that I'm probably the first one that's been out here in quite some time. And if anybody else has come out here, it's just been one or two people at a time doing something similar to what I'm doing. And so the trail's a little bit more overgrown than normal. There's a lot more fish in this water than we normally see. I'm hearing a lot more birds on this section of trail. And I've even heard an alligator and a couple of frogs grunting at me as we walked along through here. So again, this is a unique experience to get to go here. We have several Cypress domes on campus. This is the one that we've essentially dedicated to education. And so generally wildlife will avoid this Cypress dome because whenever we have colloquium or I teach this class, we have probably 1,000 students come out here over the course of every semester. And so it's pretty much a high traffic area. And so our campus is definitely showing some signs of being reclaimed by the wildlife, especially since it's been pretty quiet on our campus since mid-March. There's only a few hundred people here every day, as opposed to the almost 15,000 that are here almost every day. So at this point, the water is getting a little deeper. It is past my knees at this point. And so when you walk through this section of the trail, I don't know if you can see it right there, but there is, right, the stump of an old cypress tree. As you walk through this section, there's a bunch of roots and a bunch of cypress knees, and they're great tripping hazards. So I'm gonna try and walk and film and talk and not fall over. So if you are wondering and you've never been out here, we are still on the FGCU campus. This is part of our nature trail, which I think is always an exciting trail when it's half flooded with water. So as we walk out here, a couple of neat things, right? So this is our cypress dome, and if you've never been here, this is usually a spot where students really realize the beauty of this place. So I'm going to be quiet for just a few seconds. So that's our Cypress Dome. And so this is where we were heading on our field trip. And a couple of neat facts about our cypress ecosystem here. The center of the Cypress Dome actually doesn't have any trees growing in it. So the center of the Cypress Dome is actually back that way a little bit. You can actually see sort of a clearing in the sky, and there's a lot more vegetation on the ground. So we do have our canopy overhead. Right? And so it is pretty shady in here. There is a pretty neat reflection. I don't know what we have over here. It looks like somebody came out here and built some sort of a rudimentary shelter. So it's actually pretty neat. I don't know if you heard in the background, but I did hear an alligator grunting. So again, this is a pretty common area where students come. I've actually, in 5 years, I've actually only ever seen one alligator out here, and I came out here during a time when students typically aren't coming out here for classes, and I came out here with just 4 other people, and there happened to be an alligator, and he saw us and went underwater and went the total opposite direction. So again, if you come out here and you're respectful and you're cautious, you're going to be fine. All right, so let's talk about the Cypress Dome here. So in the Cypress Dome, right, in the center of the Cypress Dome, you're going to have the deepest water, right? It's also going to be surrounded by the tallest trees. And so It's called a dome because if you actually look at it from a distance, right, the top of the trees actually form a dome shaped structure. And so the area where the dirt parking lot used to be, so now it's partially paved. So the area formerly known as the dirt parking lot. So if you walk out there and look towards our campus trails, you can actually see the Cypress dome, right? But the other thing that happens is the water here is actually slightly acidic. It's actually got a lot of tannic acid in it from the decaying plant material. And so the tannins in the water are actually making the water slightly acidic, and it's eroding the limestone base that Florida is on. And so the center of the Cypress dome actually acts kind of like a bowl. And so the tallest trees are in the center because they get more water and more nutrients because the water, again, continuously flows downhill towards the center. So they'll have water throughout most of the year. The other interesting thing is I am almost waist deep in water here in Florida in a swamp, and I'm not getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. And so I usually point that out to students, and they all kind of realize the same thing. There might be 1 or 2 mosquitoes that followed us in here, but this is actually flowing water. Mosquitoes cannot survive in flowing water. And because they can't survive in flowing water, they actually need stagnant water to lay their eggs in. If they lay their eggs in here, they would just kind of flow downstream, get eaten by something, and not hatch. So there's very little mosquitoes here because this is actually flowing water. This water is filtering off of campus and flowing away from our campus. The other thing, this water, right, it's pretty dark in color here because it's pretty stirred up because we've had a lot of rain. But actually, if we look close, right, it's pretty clear. It's actually just got that iced tea color to it. And that iced tea color is from the tannic acid from all the decaying plant material on the ground. So cypress trees, they are deciduous, and so they drop their needles in the winter. So there's a couple of them floating on the surface here, well, right here. And so as you walk through here, the bottom feels kind of mushy, right? What you're actually walking on is all these cypress needles that have fallen off in the winter and sank to the bottom. And so that's what we're walking on. That's what adds a lot of the tannins to the water. So our campus ecosystems actually work as a filter. And so if we think about our campus, right, we've built buildings, roads, sidewalks, parking lots. That's area where water would naturally flow down into the ground. And as it's no longer flowing down into the ground, it has to run off somewhere. And so our campus is surrounded by these wetlands. And as we surrounded campus by these wetlands, well, most of these wetlands are natural, right? That water will flow into the wetlands. The wetlands will act like a sponge, and they will hold that water and release it at a slower rate, right? But as water will flow through a sponge, water flows through our wetlands, and any, solids and particulate matter and different types of pollution will actually get trapped in those wetland ecosystems. And so as the water flows through these wetlands, the wetlands actually, right, are slowing the flow of that water down, and they're filtering that water as well. So this is our Cypress Dome ecosystem. Again, I encourage you to come out here as a student. This is part of your campus. It's one of the most unique features on, I would say, any college campus. We're the college campus in the United States that has the second greatest amount of wetlands on our campus. So again, that's a really unique feature. So if you do come out here, I encourage you to come out here. But make sure you're respectful. Don't leave any trash or beer bottles or anything like that. I think it's one of the most interesting and cool places on campus to come. I don't know if you could hear that, but that's that alligator back there in the back grunting on me. So there's a bunch of wetlands that continue on to go back that way. You can continue on the trail back that way. It will actually take you all the way, sort of run back to North Village. But we're not going to go back over in that area where the alligator is, and they typically don't usually come over here again because this is a pretty heavily trafficked area. So one of the other things I always tell my students when we come out here is to take a deep breath. And I know it's hard to do it while you're watching a video, but take a deep breath and the air just tastes cleaner while we're out here. And so as we walk out here, one of the things that we'll notice is there's lichen growing on the trees, but this is actually blood lichen. And blood lichen is unique in that it only grows in areas that have really good air quality. And so it pretty much always grows in the cypress dome, and the air quality in our cypress dome is just a little bit better than on the rest of our campus. All right, one more feature I want to talk about in our cypress dome here as we walk out, and one of the things we'll talk about with wetlands is water signatures. So we could actually look at these trees and we could actually see evidence that the water has been high at different times of the year. So some of this water down here at the bottom is just kind of moisture that's absorbed into the tree. But if you look at some of these different lines, right, and you can see the lines are somewhat even right across all of these trees. Think of that as like a high tide mark on a seawall, right? That's kind of like the high water mark during the rainy season here in our cypress ecosystem. So I would say during most of the rainy season, the water is about waist deep. But I've been here when it's, again, chest deep, right towards the end of the rainy seasons, right after some major storms. And I've also been out here in late May, and I've walked all the way to the center of the cypress dome, and I have not even gotten my feet muddy because it's been totally dry. So we're gonna make our way out. I'm gonna turn the camera off because it's just the way that we came in, and then I will pick it back up as we walk out. We make our way towards the outdoor classroom. All right, so I've walked past that initial sign that said to Sovi, and so I'm making my way back towards campus here. And again, so notice the elevation change. We're walking uphill, and I'm in this water here. This water, right, was definitely a lot warmer than the water I've been in. So again, it's not really flowing. This is more stagnant water. This is the area where you may find actually some more mosquitoes and stuff that have laid their eggs in here. So moving on, again, we want to make sure we stay on the trail. And if you're going on this hike, there's no point in trying to keep your shoes dry. So again, the important thing, just stay on the trail, walk right through the water. And again, as we've transitioned again through an ecotone, right, notice the cypress trees have disappeared, right? So we've got the oaks and the pines and the palmettos have all reappeared. And so when we come out here, there is a turn to the right. There's a little shortcut out here, goes straight out to the campus road, but it's not actually part of the trail. I think it's just a shortcut that's been used one too many times. So if we make our way out here, one of the things that you'll see sometimes is our campus trail cameras, so give them a friendly wave. All right, so if we're at this crossroads here, and so this area out here is our outdoor classroom. I think I'm one of the few people that actually holds class out here sometimes. But in our outdoor classroom, we do have a series of picnic tables. We have a permanent hammock here, and so I think this is actually just really a great area for students. And we're not too far from campus. This is like 5-minute walk from the library to get here, but the temperature is about 5 to 10 degrees cooler than it is on the main part of campus. It's quieter out here. I realize there's an airplane flying over us. I'm trying to say it's quieter out here, but it generally is quieter out here. It's a little bit cooler. It's a nice place if you want to study, take a nap in your hammock, just get away from campus life for just a little bit. And so this is our outdoor classroom. And so if you wanted to continue along our campus trails, right, this is the intramural field right in front of us. This is the direction we came from, so we headed down there. If you make a left, that'll take you all the way into the Cypress Dome. If you follow this trail here, this will actually take you up to North Lake, right in that little knoll right there. In our class, if we talk about karst topography and we talk about our limestone base, there's actually a nice chunk of limestone right here. And we can see how, right, the water being slightly acidic has eroded this. And this is kind of a broken chunk, but if you find larger chunks, it does have holes in it. Kind of looks like Swiss cheese. All right, and so here's our campus trail sign. And so what we did today is I actually parked my car right here in garage 2. I walked along the South Village Bridge. We went in through here. That's where some of our pine flatwoods were. We walked along here. We saw the eco-tune. Kind of was an oak hammock here. Wait till that guy goes by. When we were behind Sovi, then we started to see some more water here, and again in ecotone we saw a decline in elevation. This was our trail that we walked along right here. This was a branch that we didn't take, and then this is where we made that right turn and we actually went into the Cypress Dome right here. Again, I had mentioned that there was another trail that will actually take you up to North Lake, so this continues on behind the Cypress Dome. Will actually take you up to some of our sports fields. So we were in here, we walked back out, we walked right here, and then this was the oak hammock area where the outdoor classroom was, and this is where we are right here. So there is another Cypress Dome on campus here. We don't actually visit this Cypress Dome with our students. We leave that one wild, so it does have a lot more wildlife in it. It has a family of otters that lives in it. But our campus trails will actually take you can walk right around them, and then these trails will actually take you up to different spots in North Lake. One of the other things while I'm here, while taking a look at the map, if you've ever taken a look on our campus, we do have wetlands right out here on the front side of campus. These are actually filter marshes. So these two right here, these are created wetlands to help deal with all the impervious surfaces that we've built on campus. And so water flows backwards from campus here into some of these natural areas. Water flows out here to the front and actually goes through these filter marshes before they make it out here to Ben Hill Griffin, and they flow eventually down into the Estero River and eventually into Estero Bay. Historically, our nature trail, this is where the South Village Road is now, but we used to have the nature trail would go all the way from here all the way over here to the food court. Not the food court. I saw South Court here. The food forest. So you used to be able to walk on from the food forest, which is right here, get on the trail, walk all the way around here. Again, most of this trail doesn't exist anymore because of new development. And then this is where we picked up. We walked into the Cypress Dome here and we walked out here, but you could continue on and go all the way to different spots in North Lake. And so that's our campus trails. So we started out in our pine flatwoods ecosystem. Again, historically, they should be burned more frequently than they are, but it's a bit overgrown in there. And we don't actually have natural fires on campus anymore. We practice fire suppression and mechanical removal. We walked through an ecotone, and then we went to the oak hammocks, where again we saw most of the vegetation overhead and less vegetation on the ground. And then we continued on. We went in through another ecotone, we went downhill, and we went into our Cypress ecosystems. So that is our campus trails field trip. I hope you guys had a good time. I hope you learned something.